Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Women in Health Tech Wednesday. I'm great to have everyone. I'm excited to be your host today, as well as the next couple of weeks. So, look forward to spending more time with you. Want to point out just a couple of reminders. Be sure to join us for the Women's Health Tech Challenge that's coming up February the 10th. Um, you'll get a link for that afterwards as well. And then our February symposium on February the 23rd from 11 to 2 p.m. We look forward to seeing everyone. It's hard to believe that we're already in February. We're going to just jump right into today's guest. Lily Wound is a partner at Goodwin, and we are very excited to have you. I'm looking forward to chatting with you some more. Lily, if you, do I see you on here? There you are. Awesome. Hi, Lily. And we're just going to start with, I'll let you introduce yourself further and give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Sure. No, thank you so much for having me here, Lisa. It's great to be have this opportunity to talk about my career. So I'm a lawyer. I'm a partner at a law firm called Goodwin Proctor. I'm based out of the New York office, and I do spend a lot of time in Boston as well. I'm in what's called the life sciences group, and we focus on a lot of companies who are really, at the cutting edge of science. So it's a really fascinating job, to be where I am. And in my practice area is what we call IP transactions, which is really, I say everything that's commercial, not corporate, and not patents. But we do have a focus on collaboration and licensing deals where there's a lot of focus on thinking through IP issues.
That's awesome. That's really interesting too. I'd love to know about, I mean, did you always see yourself as a lawyer, or did you have another path planned there as well?
Yeah, no, so never. When I grew up, I wanted to be a poet. I still actually, in my mind, still think that I'm going to be a poet. I studied with Seamus Heaney and Louise Gluck when I was at Harvard, actually as an undergraduate. They're both Nobel laureates, and that is still my dream to get back there one day. But I have to say, when I was an undergrad, being, I think, of Chinese descent with those parents, I studied biochemical sciences at Harvard. And so I always say that my legal career started because I was a failed scientist. I was a really bad scientist, even though I spent a lot of time working at the medical school, and I wrote a thesis in order to graduate with the degree. Now looking back, it's actually been very helpful because being in life sciences, having a science background is actually getting to be important, particularly when you're looking at IP issues.
Oh, that's so interesting. That's that's a fascinating background too. Tell me what the transition was like for you to go from law school and then going into a firm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think when I first started law school, I was primarily there because I knew that it was something that my parents were okay with, you know, now that they knew I wasn't going to be a doctor.
Or a poet.
Yeah, exactly. So it was sort of a way to soften the blow, and then there really wasn't another choice after being a lawyer, I think, at the time. But it turns out it's been a good ride because there's a lot of skill sets you need to be a lawyer. Among them being able to write. So that was sort of a good fit for me. And then as you sort of progress in your career, being able to articulate your thoughts, verbally, and succinctly. And I do think that the law itself, the practice has changed dramatically over the years. I think as a young associate, you were when I was a young associate, there's a lot of focus on being a generalist. So you really had to know how to do M&A. You had to know, you had to have worked on, IPOs. You had to have had
Mhm.
a wide variety of experiences in order to be a really good counselor. These days, I think, being an associate, I find associates want to specialize very early. They actually want to start out specialized. I think at Goodwin, we asked them to specialize after 1 year. And I find that to be kind of an interesting trend. Although in my view, I think, at the end of the day, for all lawyers, we can never expect that the only questions we get asked are going to be in our own, special, sort
Yeah.
of area. So one of the things I think that is beneficial to being a generalist is at least you can spot the issue and direct it to the right person. So I'm still, I think, old-fashioned that way. And then, the trajectory from law school to the law firm, that's a pretty well-worn path. Most people do try to go from law school into a law firm to start their practice. Law firms are really great places for young lawyers to, get really great experiences working with multiple clients, learning what being a lawyer is like, having more senior lawyers mentor them. I think all of that is really helpful for lawyers, young lawyers coming out of law school.
Does that change a lot also? When you think about being an associate versus a partner and the skills that it takes, it just at this stage of your career, how has that shifted as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I also had an unusual experience because I also went in-house, and I could talk about that,
Yeah.
next. But I do think from going from an associate to a partner well, for me, it was a very long journey. And in the middle, I spent a lot of time as a counsel, and I can explain that a little bit as well. But, I think as a young associate, the most important thing is to be really responsive and really be able to be open to learning, because really at the end of the day, nobody's going to come out of law school, enter into a law firm, and be able to, actually do the work.
Mhm.
My piece of advice to young lawyers is you do actually have to spend some time on your own, figuring things out. And I did that. I used to read agreements for fun. And I just brought home agreements and I read them, and that helped me to figure out how to draft. And I think one of the first skill sets that you sort of need to learn as a young lawyer is how to draft, how to write, because you're not going to be, likely put out there to have, drive discussions with clients or negotiate deals. You're really at the beginning, figuring out how to draft and how to spot the issues. They go hand in hand. um, and just getting the necessary experience to be able to, get comfortable with those kinds of skill sets. And then, I remember that, for a very long time in my career, I was usually second seat, even when I was a counsel. So I was not really necessarily on negotiations, leading the negotiations, or, or driving those discussions. I was really there to be supportive. After the negotiations were over, I went back and I revised the drafts to reflect what was discussed. So I find now as a partner, my job has changed in the sense that I do have associates, who will sit on the calls like I used to
Yeah.
and take what was discussed and revise the draft accordingly. And my job is really to try to stay higher picture, and also to, to negotiate and lead on deals.
Well, it's clear you can see how that foundation taught you or prepared you really for what you're doing today. And by the way, I think my idea of fun may be different than yours. If yours is reading agreements at night, no, that's I want to shift gears for just a little bit and talk about innovation and how that comes into play from really even when you started your career to the way you see it today, and how that comes into play in healthcare.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that one of the things that makes my job really interesting is that it's being on the cutting edge of so many areas. There's a lot of convergence between, as you said, healthcare tech, life sciences and tech,
Mm.
and then in life sciences itself, there is a lot of, a lot of innovation on the science side. So I really have come to appreciate where I am right now, because it's 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 different than thinking about things when I was an associate, which is, how am I going to learn how to do the job? Now it's talking to people, a lot of startups, a lot of executives about what their vision is for their business, and then trying to transform, what they're thinking on the science side to something that is commercializable. And that is, a large part of what I do, because I kind of sit on that intersection between IP and
Yeah.
commercial. And what I always say to clients is, that's great. Like, we all know when you go to your patent lawyers, you're going to protect the science, but the next step of it is, what are we talking about? What are you going to sell?
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of the conversation, because everybody has a great platform. They have interesting ideas, they have interesting products, and it's just trying to figure out how best to guide them, to find those opportunities and then make the most of the opportunities, which requires you, I think, in many ways to position, what you're selling.
Yeah.
So
I think that's great too. I mean, innovation isn't just technology. Obviously, it's much, much broader than that. And that's what I'm hearing from what you're saying there as well.
yeah, no, absolutely. But it is so exciting, in life sciences, for example, with all the AI
Yeah.
platforms, precision medicine, all of these capabilities to, expedite, the R&D process, or expedite other processes, also to develop greater insights or more fine-tuned insights. And it's really, I think, transforming the industry.
That's awesome. That's such an incredibly interesting as well. Um, well, because we are women in tech, and I'd love to kind of think a little bit more and talk to you about your experience in law, but as a woman and from a diverse perspective, what has that been like for you? What's been your experience, and what could you share with the audience?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really big question, and I definitely would say, based on my own experiences, it's been harder to be a woman than to be diverse. I think the threshold question has always been really being, a woman.
Yeah.
And I think it has gotten a lot better. I've been practicing now for over 20 years. So I think when I think about the time I started, it was a very different time. There wasn't even an iPhone or, a BlackBerry when I first started. So you can imagine, I don't think I ever left the building. But I do think about my career, and for example, my husband's career. We met, as associates, sharing, or even summer associates, I think, sharing an office at the same law firm. So you can't find two people who have started at exactly the same
Wow.
place and same time and same location. And he made, equity partner, within 8 years. So his path was pretty straightforward. And for me, it took probably another, 8 to 10 years to get to partner. And I think that that's something that should be said, because I think
Yeah.
for women, the path is not always so obvious. It's not so obvious to both your employer sometimes, but also to yourself, because there are times in your life where you sort of have to check out, especially during those years when you're trying to have children, and then,
Right.
having the children.
Right. Right.
And at some point you think, how do I sort of take one step back, because it's just some this, and that's why I did want to talk about the counsel piece. So I made it to counsel,
Right.
but the push to partner was much longer, because of all the things that sort of happened in the intervening 10 or so years, just, trying to have children, and then caring for them. So, you
Wow.
know, and then some people, I think, along the ways have reacted, differently. Some, people that I worked for was always supportive. and some you don't always find supportive, and you have to, somehow figure out how to accept that, right?
Hmm.
And not be bitter about it.
Well, that's you've got such an interesting perspective, and you're right to have the same exact path that starting with your husband. That's really amazing that you have that, and you kind of see the parallels, truly the parallels.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, well, this is always fun to talk about. So, can you share some things outside of your career that you are focused on, or a little bit more of your life?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I do have this is I should explain this. I have a master's in public health. That was my transition of easing my parents out of science, and so
That's
that's why I have
awesome.
a sort of interim period, because they were kind of, if I wasn't going to go to medical school, I had to sort of stay in science. So that was sort of my transition. But it turns out to be, and I reconnected. I did my MBA at Boston University. Been reconnecting with the Alumni Association there as well. That has been really for me, probably on a personal level, the most influential
Yeah,
degree, because you don't meet people who have a degree in this field who don't have a sense of wanting to give back to the world. And we recently had a reunion, at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, where they had classes, current students all the way to graduates, beyond me. Hard to believe that. And and all in the museum mingling, and there's not a single person in there. I think I probably was the only lawyer. Most people had spent, devoted their careers to doing some sort of good. And so I've always felt very strongly that there should be, that I should have a robust sort of life outside of the law.
right.
And so one of the things that I feel good about is that I used to run Young Women Bio for Women in Bio. I ran it for 8 years, the national chair, trying to get young girls into STEM. And I think both building and growing an organization, and also trying to do all this outreach to young girls. It taught me a lot about, looking at the situation across the country for girls and access. But also, even if you provide access and you provide opportunities, and you find professionals who are really interested in helping girls get into STEM, you also have systemic issues, which is how transportation issues, parental support issues. You come across a lot of different issues as you try to pursue something like this. Um, and I feel like the other part that has been interesting that I should note is that sort of in my extracurricular life, it also gave me the confidence in my professional life, because I had a wide open door to grow and build this organization, and I would, and to be the leader. As an associate, or even as a counsel in a law firm, you don't have that chance. So I think somewhere along the way, you find your voice, and I believe that those skill sets from my extracurricular activities, also sort of helped me prepare to where I am right now, being a partner, so I do think they go hand in hand. But I continue to think that, it's, I just joined the enterprise committee at the trustees of reservations in Massachusetts. I'm on the board of life sciences, life science cares in New York. There's a lot of, I'm also on the board of Asian Women for Health. So there's a lot of ways, I think, to, and opportunities to sort of get involved, and be active. And I hope to continue to do so and actually keep expanding, when
Yeah,
I'm
those
done.
are amazing. You're definitely very busy, but I couldn't agree with you more. It's like often it's not directly in your yeah, it's still related to your career, but it's all those other associations and involvements that often give us an opportunity to grow with either peers or outside of our industry, that's a little unique. So I love that you've done that. What advice would you have for really for women that are interested in STEM are looking at that as a career path.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, I think there's an increasing awareness. For example, I know
Mm,
in New York City through life science cares, that we now have this sort of group of education, either leaders in New York City or leaders of organizations that support education in New York City, and to provide a continuum from elementary school all the way through high school and then into the CUNY system, which is a public college system in New York City. And so to try to create opportunities for kids who never would have had access otherwise to create a path,
yeah.
and that is not my doing, that is other people's doing, but it's been very interesting to see all of these really creative, incredible women trying to find, a path for these kids. And I forgot I forgot I forgot what your question was. Can you repeat that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it could go either, really what advice do you have, to bring more women into STEM, but then, you can build off of that too with just advice for women in general, that are advancing their careers and making a career for themselves.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that there is, being in the life sciences, industry, it is, it is still, lots of opportunity for women, to find success.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it is, there's a lot to be done, and work to be done there. And to bring in the female perspective, both in terms of, identifying where innovation needs are, but also leadership opportunities,
Yeah.
And one of the things that I just wanted to say that has been useful to me in my sort of extracurricular life is that it's not um, uh, an understood or foregone conclusion that even now as a partner, that I'm going to easily network with all the, sort of the groups, the VC groups that are still, largely,
Yeah.
dominated by men. But you can find ways of building networks, through other ways, and I do think that Life Science Cares is a good example because, it's founded by Rob Perez, and many of the members on the board are very well known and well established, folks in life sciences in each of those specific regions. So it has become also, putting the mission aside, a good
Yeah.
networking opportunity. So, which I wouldn't have had sort of just naturally speaking in my day-to-day work. So there are, ways where I think you can, do good in the world and then sort of
Yeah.
converge, in terms of, where it can be beneficial to your career as well.
That's so awesome. So would that be, I mean, we're right here at the closing, but would that be along the lines of your advice also to women at this point in in their career, or is it that involvement in being engaged in other groups, or do you have additional advice to offer them?
Yeah, no, I think that, if I do think that it is a good piece of advice in the sense that if you're not finding the opportunities at your desk, at your job,
Yeah.
there are ways to grow your skill sets, outside of that universe. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to get out of that desk and find another job.
Yeah.
Although
Right.
that's a possibility, of course, as well. That's one way to progress. But there's also other ways to sort of get involved in other activities, and build the skill sets, being able to lead, being able to speak, being able to be comfortable with different, people. And, and for me, for a very long time in my career, I felt uncomfortable in certain situations, and
Mm.
sort of now over time, they don't bother me anymore, and leading in the negotiation, for example, if you asked me 10 years ago, I would have been hiding behind the wall, and now I don't have a problem with that. So yeah, there are
Yeah.
lots of ways, I think, to get creative to develop these skills.
I love that. That is so awesome. You know, that you've got such a unique perspective. I think just given the uniqueness of your career path. So thank you so much for sharing this with me today and with our audience. And it was such a pleasure to talk to you. I'm sure we'll see you again in the future. But Lily, thank you. I'm really grateful to have the conversation with you.
No, thank you so much for having me here.
Awesome. Well, as we wrap up today, just want to close with a couple of last minute reminders here. But we have the Age Tech Collaborative with AARP that's coming up on February the 16th from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern. So please join us for that. And as always, thank you to our sponsors. We are very grateful for you, and thank you for your support. Be sure to join us next week. I'll be back again. We have Suzette Damasco from FFF in Circle, and we are very excited to have a conversation with her. So I look forward to that. Please come back and join us next week. Thank you again, Lily. It was really wonderful to chat with you and learn so much about your background. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.